Hey, hello! Welcome back to the Wintry Wyvern and another episode of Breaking UA, a series where we take a look at some of 5e's Unearthed Arcana and predict how they're going to change in their official release. We just got the exciting announcement that Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is coming out in May, and is going to have the 3 Gothic lineages, as well as the Bard College of Spirits and the Undead Pact Warlock. Today we're going to be taking a look at the latter beat by beat and checking out where there's room for improvement or rebuilding. If you're watching this after May 18th, this will be a fun look at what used to be. If you're here before then, you're free to join me in the speculation. Timestamps are below if you want to skip around, so let's jump right in, shall we? The Undead Warlock's a bit of a unique case. It came out on August 5th, 2020, after all of the subclasses for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything were dropped as UA, but before the actual book was released. It was left to speculation if this subclass would be revised in time for Tasha's, and we soon came to realize it'd be left for a book in 2021. The Undead Warlock speaks of serving a patron of the undead variety, Acererak the Lich, Azalin the Dark Lord Lich ruler of Ravenloft's Darkon, Lord Soth, a Death Knight and former Dark Lord of Dragonlance's Sithicus, and Strahd the infamous vampire Dark Lord of Ravenloft's Barovia. People immediately noticed thematic similarities with the Undying Warlock from Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which doesn't shy away from its own list of undead Lich-aligned patrons. Skag was released back in 2015, and many of the subclasses in that book have been re-released into other books since. Undying Warlock is notoriously a very weak subclass, and this new UA seems to be its unspoken successor, even though they share barely any similar features. I'll be sure to compare the two every now and then a bit later, but quietly erasing Skag from the D&D logs is definitely a discussion for another video down the road. Anyway, let's get to the features. The expanded spell list has a handful of spooky spells dealing with the dead, layers of protective magic, and generally evil presenting effects. It's got a bit of a crossover with Undying Warlock and the Grave and Death Domain Cleric, which is expected. Some of these are the poster child necromancy shenanigans. It's worth mentioning that none of these are standard Warlock spells, so 10 new options are definitely welcome. Big fan of Greater Invisibility, a very useful combat spell, and Phantom Steed, which really gives off that Four Horsemen vibe. Form of Dread is the signature ability of the subclass, and if you've ever watched an episode of Bleach, you know exactly what this looks like. With a bonus action, you transform for a minute and get a great handful of benefits: temp HP, immunity to being frightened, and a once per turn saving throw to frighten your enemies. Warlock is a famously front-loaded class, and Undead Warlock is apparently no exception. It's already got the Tasha signature of charges equal to proficiency bonus, meaning by level 5 you could easily have this up for 30 turns a day with no more than 1 level of Warlock. There's no specified range, so you could frighten somebody from 120 feet away if you'd like. The temp HP could encourage some frontline talents though, as that is a solid amount of bonus health. The middle feature, however, gets a bit problematic if you check the D&D subclass listing. The Conquest Paladin has a neat little ability at level 7 called Aura of Conquest. Any creature frightened of the Paladin within 10 feet has its speed reduced to 0, meaning it can't run away from the source of fear, and has disadvantage on all attacks. The frightened condition is a bit hard to come by, and the Conquest Paladin previously had to rely on their Channel Divinity to trigger it. Now, hear me out, what if a 1-level dip in Warlock could give you 30 turns of this frightened condition? This 8-level combo is really good for completely locking down a single person, and without requiring any sort of concentration. It's just devastating to any enemies without frightened immunity. Let's keep going. Death Touched at level 6 is when this subclass goes a little over the deep end. This feature combined with the first actually reminds me of the old UA Phoenix Sorcerer's Mantle of Flame. It's a bonus action transformation that lasts for a minute and offers you bonus damage when using a certain damage type. It was notoriously very good and also very bad for the sheer amount of damage you could pump out with Scorching Ray, and its incredibly long recharge of once per long rest. Not needing to eat, drink, or breathe is a classic undead boon that we've already kind of seen in the Undying's level 10 feature, and in the new Reborn lineage. The truly frightening bonus is the second half. You can replace any damage you deal from an attack into necrotic damage, and then, if you're in Form of Dread, you can double one of the dice you roll for the attack. Okay, let's break that down. Necrotic damage on all attacks? Great. Flavorful. Actually well resisted on plenty of monsters, so it's a situational buff. Doubling a damage die on every attack? I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like automatic critical hitting. Great Axe attacks become 2d12, for example, and more importantly, Eldritch Blasts become 2d10 for every bolt. This is not a once per turn feature, this is not on a charge system. You get 30 turns of this minimum. Assuming you land 2 bolts at level 6, you're dealing 4d10 damage on a cantrip, plus 8 more with Agonizing Blast. And lest we forget, you can still crit. We can be honest and say that's just obscene damage for that level range. This on top of the Frighten makes you very hard to deal with in single enemy combat. It's a huge damage spike that will likely never fall off, only becoming stronger in time and levels. One of my favorite reactions to this was on D&D Beyond actually, so I'm glad they shared my sentiment.
You're adding another D10 on every ray.
On every ray. Wow.
I know this feels very powerful.
Definitely a pain point that we'll come back to at the end of this video. Coming back to the realm of mortals, we have Mortal Husk, which is still really strong. In Form of Dread, you have straight up immunity to necrotic damage, and when you die, you don't really, exploding in place and coming back a bit tired with 1 hit point. The immunity is a lot. There are very, very few ways to gain immunity to any damage type in D&D, and this is only level 10. A good handful of warlocks get some form of resistance in their subclass features, not so much immunity. In case we've forgotten, the Undead Warlock also has immunity to the Frighten condition, so yeah, add more to the pile. Again, I'm seeing parallels to the old Phoenix Sorcerer. Instead of dying, you deal damage around you and gain 1 hit point. A damaging revival mechanic can also be found in the Celestial Warlock subclass, but I'm definitely seeing more resemblance in the former. Recycling old UA ideas is not a new concept, and I'm happy to see some light being shed on previously scrapped features. If I didn't, I probably wouldn't be making this video series. Anyway, wrapping this up with a tidy bow is Spirit Projection at 14th level. Now, this looks like a lot, and it is, but at 14th level everything is justifiably powerful. Barbarian resistance, fly speed, no component casting, sure, why not, throw it on. Again, Form of Dread gets stronger, now healing you when you deal necrotic damage. Important note that this does work on spells, so if you're looking for a big chunk of health, you might want to look towards Blight or Finger of Death. A fun little note is that you leave your body behind, which can still be hit, so I have this great visual of the big bad just pummeling your limp noodle body while you're floating around. Well, that was a ride, so let's think about how we would best build a class like this. We can revisit that Paladin build, 7 levels of Paladin in Conquest, and at least 1 level in Warlock, mixed for a tanky bruiser that gets small chunks of temp HP, a frightened effect every turn, and tremendous amounts of lockdown. Barbarian Warlocks might finally be a thing. 2 levels in Barbarian and 6 in Warlock nets you 4 damage resistances, some great HP and temp HP, and a mighty 2d12 Great Axe swinging ever so recklessly. Sorlocks are always a tried and true combo. Minimum 6 levels in Warlock and the rest in Sorcerer is a great mix of damage and extra spell slots. Quicken casting Eldritch Blast doubles your beams per turn, so 6 shots with Agonizing Blast at level 11 nets you a clean 12d10 plus 30 damage at the cost of 2 itty-bitty sorcery points. Not to say pure Warlock wouldn't be great on its own. A combination of Repelling Blast and Lance of Lethargy, on top of your frightening Eldritch Blast, will all but guarantee that one bad guy will never ever reach you. Moving on to revisions, I think I've made my talking points clear by now. The aesthetic is perfectly fine, fits right into the new Ravenloft book, and gives players an undead subclass we can properly be proud of. I love Form of Dread aesthetically, and mechanically it already looked a lot like the Tasha subclasses, but I plan to skim a bit off the top to keep it in line with its peers. I think advantage on frightened saving throws is more than enough. Surprisingly, I don't expect the Conquest Paladin Warlock combo to change. While it is very strong, most of the big bads at higher levels gain immunity to frightened, and we'll just ignore it. It could very well be nerfed if the feedback is harsh enough and they choose to respect the multi-classing shenanigans of releases from 4 years ago. That double damage dice bonus is absolutely gone, and wizards would be crazy to leave it in. They might make the damage more situational, perhaps only triggering on frightened creatures to complement your first level abilities. I get that they like to push boundaries on UA, but auto-critting every attack is not worth asking about. I still love that this works on weapons too, painting a really cool visual and a unique way to bypass resistances, so I hope that stays in. I think immunity to necrotic damage is gone too. Immunity to any damage is just not really a thing for players. It might be better suited for the 14th level Spirit Projection, but who's really to say? I wouldn't change a thing on the explosion, though they might change it to only damage creatures of your choice, which was a repeated change on the Wild Magic Barbarians features. It doesn't really make sense, when you're exploding and all, but hey, Celestial Warlock can choose, so there's precedent. Spirit Projection I don't expect to change at all. It's a great final form ability, really channeling that Shinigami aspect I've come to know and love, and holds its own at higher levels. The healing isn't really that big of a problem if they nerf the double damage thing on Grave Touch, so that gets my okay. And that's it! Undead Warlock releases on May 18th with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and when it does, we'll definitely come back and see how much we got right. Let me know in the comments if anyone's already given this a whirl, is it as busted as it sounds, and what sort of character you think would suit this best. May your Halloweens always come early, your Bleach references be ever plentiful, and above all stay frosty.